The desolate planet. The harsh sun beat down on the barren, dusty landscape of the desert planet. For miles in every direction, there was nothing but sand and rocky formations. The wind howled, carrying the scent of dry earth and the promise of nothingness. It was a place where hope went to die, where life had no place to grow, and death seemed to always be waiting. For most, it was a planet that symbolized the end, but for one man, it was the beginning of an unexpected journey. John Drake had been sentenced to die here. A soldier, once fighting for a cause he believed in, now abandoned and left to rot. His crime: betraying his superiors in a rebellion he thought would save countless lives. But instead of honor or glory, he had been betrayed in return and condemned to this desolate rock with no more than the barest of survival supplies. His boots crunched against the dry earth with each step as he made his way through the endless expanse. His water supply had long since run out, and his ration packs were nothing more than dust and crumbs. He could feel his strength fading, his body growing weaker with each passing hour. The heat of the sun was unbearable, and the cold of the night would soon follow, leaving him shivering in the dark. He had no illusions left. He was going to die here. John had always been a fighter, a survivor. He had faced battlefields filled with enemies, had taken on missions that seemed impossible, and had made it out alive. But this was different. No enemy to fight, no battle to win, just the endless stretch of sand, the burning sun, and the creeping death that loomed closer with every breath. As he walked, he thought back to the time before this. A time when he had been part of something bigger, when he believed in the mission and the cause. He had fought to protect people, to make the galaxy a safer place. But now he felt nothing but emptiness. The world he once knew seemed like a dream that was slipping further and further away. He had failed. His comrades, his family, they were all gone, and there was no one left to mourn him. John's thoughts were interrupted by a strange sensation, a flicker of movement on the horizon. He stopped and squinted into the distance, trying to make sense of what he saw. It looked like a mirage, shimmering in the heat of the desert. At first, he thought it was just another illusion brought on by dehydration and exhaustion. But something inside him urged him to keep looking. His heart began to race, and adrenaline coursed through his veins. Was it a ship, a vehicle, or was he simply seeing things? He couldn't afford to make mistakes now. The thought of finding anything, even the smallest sign of life, gave him a spark of hope that he hadn't felt in days. But at the same time, fear gripped him. What if it wasn't real? What if it was just another cruel trick of the desert? He hesitated for a moment, but then, driven by desperation, he began to walk towards the shimmering figure. Each step felt heavier than the last, his body protesting, but his mind was focused. His survival instincts kicked in. He had nothing left to lose. The thought of dying alone, without knowing if he had been abandoned forever, was too much to bear. The closer he got, the clearer the shape became. It was a structure. No, a building, unlike anything he had seen before. It was ancient, covered in layers of dust and sand, but still standing tall. The design was alien, nothing like the architecture of his home world. The walls were smooth and curved, made of materials that didn't look like anything found on Earth. It was as if the building had been left behind by another civilization long ago. John's heart skipped a beat. Could this be the answer he was looking for? Could there be something, someone, out here? As he stepped closer, he felt the air shift, a strange coolness sweeping over him as if the very presence of the building was altering the temperature of the desert around him. His legs were shaky, his body exhausted, but he forced himself to move forward. As he reached the entrance of the structure, he paused. A sense of unease settled over him. It was quiet, too quiet. The planet had been silent ever since he arrived, but now the silence seemed almost unnatural. There was no sound, no movement, no sign of life, just the stillness of a place forgotten by time. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The cool air of the interior was a relief to his burning skin, and he could feel moisture in the air, something he hadn't experienced since arriving on this planet. It was as though the building was protected from the harshness of the outside world. The walls inside were lined with strange, glowing symbols that pulsed softly, casting an eerie light across the dark space. The floor was smooth and untouched by the desert's endless sands. But it wasn't the strange architecture or the foreign symbols that caught his attention. It was what he saw in the center of the room. A pool of water, glowing with an otherworldly light. It was beautiful, almost magical, and for a moment, John forgot about the desert outside. The sight of the water made him forget his thirst, his hunger, even the pain in his body. It was as if the pool was calling to him, promising life in a place where death was the only certainty. But just as he took a step closer to the water, he heard something, a soft sound, like the rustle of fabric, followed by the faintest whisper of movement. He stopped, every muscle in his body tensing, and turned slowly to face the source of the sound. And that's when he saw them. Figures standing in the shadows, watching him. They were unlike anything he had ever seen. Beautiful, yes, but something about them felt otherworldly. Their eyes glowed with a strange light, and their features were delicate yet strong. They were alien, yet human in their grace. The moment their gazes met his, John felt a chill run down his spine. He wasn't alone anymore, and his life on this desolate planet was about to take a turn he never expected. A mysterious discovery. John's heart pounded as he stood frozen, staring at the figures in the shadows. For a long moment, he wasn't sure whether his mind was playing tricks on him. The heat, the exhaustion, the isolation, it could all be warping his perception. But as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he could see them clearly now. 3 figures, standing with a quiet dignity. Their skin shimmered in the low light, like polished stone, and their long flowing hair appeared to move on its own, almost as if the wind was alive inside the building. For the first time in days, John felt a spark of hope. These beings, were they real? Were they human? But no, there was something undeniably alien about them. Their eyes glowed softly in the darkness, an ethereal blue that seemed to pierce through the dust and the shadows. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. John felt an overwhelming urge to speak, to ask them who they were, where they came from, and why they were here. But something about the stillness of the moment stopped him. They didn't move. They didn't speak. It was as if they were waiting for him to make the first move. John's mind raced. What was he supposed to do now? Should he approach them? Would they help him, or were they the reason he had been left to die on this desert planet? Doubt gnawed at him, but the desperation to survive outweighed his fear. Slowly, he took a cautious step forward. The alien beings didn't flinch. In fact, they seemed to welcome his approach with a calm that made John feel oddly safe. It was as though they weren't concerned with his presence. I don't know what's happening," John muttered under his breath, though he wasn't sure if they could even understand him. He continued to move closer, driven by a strange sense of curiosity that seemed stronger than any instinct he had left to protect himself. The closest figure stepped forward, her features delicate and mesmerizing. Her voice, when it came, was soft but full of an ancient wisdom that echoed in the depths of John's mind. "You are not alone," she said. Her words seemed to reverberate through the very air, as though they were being spoken directly into his consciousness. John blinked, taken aback. What? What do you mean?" The alien girl's gaze softened as she observed him. There was sadness in her eyes, and something that John couldn't quite place, something far older than his own life. "You were sent here to die, weren't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John's throat tightened. He couldn't believe how much this one being seemed to understand him without him saying a word. "Yeah," he replied hoarsely. I was." He looked away, the weight of his hopelessness threatening to crush him. The alien girl nodded, her glowing eyes dimming slightly as if she understood his pain. "This place is not as empty as it seems," she said cryptically. "There is more here than you can see, more than you can understand." John glanced around the room, noticing the intricate carvings on the walls and the odd hum in the air. There was a strange energy here, something that defied logic. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice tinged with awe and fear. "A refuge," she replied simply. "A sanctuary for those who have nowhere else to turn. But it is not just a place of peace. It is also a place of power. A power that has been dormant for ages." John's curiosity burned stronger than ever. "A place of power? What do you mean? And why are you here?" Her expression softened further. "We were once rulers of a great empire. Our people, our world, was destroyed by an enemy we could not defeat. But we survived, hidden away in this forgotten place. We were not alone then, and we are not alone now. You have come here for a reason." John's heart skipped a beat. "I didn't come here on purpose," he said. "I was sentenced to die here." He shook his head, trying to understand. "I'm just a soldier. Why would you need me? I'm no one special." "You have more power than you know," she replied cryptically, her gaze piercing into him. "The question is not whether you are special. The question is whether you will rise to the challenge. The enemy that destroyed us is still out there. And they are looking for us. They are looking for you." John felt a chill run down his spine as her words sank in. He had no idea what this alien girl meant, but he knew one thing. His life was about to change in a way he never expected. He had come to this planet thinking he was alone, a forgotten soul left to die in the wasteland. But now, it seemed that fate had something else in mind for him. "What do I have to do?" John asked, his voice filled with determination despite the uncertainty swirling inside him. The alien girl stepped back, and the other two beings moved forward, their movements fluid and graceful, like the flow of water. "Come with us," she said. "We will show you what you need to see. But beware, there is no turning back. Once you enter this path, there is no going back to the life you knew, only forward, only change." John hesitated for a moment, but then, as if some unseen force was pushing him forward, he nodded. "All right, I'm in." With that, the alien girl extended her hand, and the glowing light around her intensified, filling the room with a soft, warm glow. John felt a surge of energy, a rush of something unknown. But it wasn't fear. It was the feeling of a new purpose, something he hadn't felt in a long time. The journey ahead would be dangerous. He knew that much. But for the first time since he arrived on this planet, he felt like he wasn't alone anymore. And in a place like this, that was all he needed to survive. Encounter with the alien girls. The air around John shimmered with a soft, ethereal glow as the alien girl reached out her hand to him. It wasn't just the light from the structure that illuminated the room, but something deeper, something from within these beings themselves. The sensation was almost overwhelming, like the very atmosphere was alive and breathing, drawing him in with an invisible force. John hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of his decision press on his chest. His eyes flicked to the glowing pool of water behind him. He hadn't even noticed before, but now it seemed as though the water was alive with a strange, pulsating energy. The longer he stood there, the more he realized that everything around him, the alien girls, the glowing walls, the pool, was connected in some way that he couldn't fully understand. But then, the soft voice of the alien girl cut through his swirling thoughts. "Come," she said, her words barely a whisper, yet they seemed to echo in the silence of the room. "You have seen enough to know we are not like others. Let us show you who we are." With a deep breath, John stepped forward, his boots quiet against the smooth stone floor. The moment his hand brushed against the alien girl's, he felt a strange warmth spread through his body, a surge of energy that made him feel strangely alive, as though every nerve was waking up from a long slumber. As he moved deeper into the room, the other two girls followed closely behind. The air grew even thicker with their presence. John could feel the pulse of their power, a hum that seemed to come from within the walls, from within the very fabric of the structure itself. The glow in their eyes never wavered, and with each step they took, it was as though the room itself responded to them, brightening, shifting, alive. They led him through a narrow corridor that spiraled downwards, deeper into the heart of the structure. As they walked, John couldn't help but notice how different they were from anyone he had ever known. Their movements were fluid, like they were part of the very environment around them. There was no hesitation in their steps, no uncertainty, just the quiet confidence of beings who had seen both the rise and fall of civilizations. They finally reached a large chamber, more expansive than any room John had seen before. The walls were lined with strange, glowing symbols that seemed to pulse with a rhythmic beat, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. In the center of the room, a massive crystal stood tall, taller than any building John had ever seen. It was transparent, yet it seemed to contain a swirling, ever-shifting energy within it, glowing with every color imaginable. John's breath caught in his throat. This was something beyond his understanding, something far greater than anything he had ever known. The crystal, one of the alien girls spoke, her voice echoing in the chamber, is the heart of our people. It holds the knowledge and power of an entire civilization, but it has been dormant for many years, waiting for the right moment. John stared at it, transfixed. What do you mean? What is it waiting for? The first alien girl, the one who had spoken to him earlier, stepped forward, her eyes never leaving his. It is waiting for you. We are waiting for you. His mind spun, and confusion flooded his thoughts. For me? But why? I'm just a soldier. I have nothing special about me. I don't understand. You are more than what you think, the girl said softly. You have been chosen. The power inside the crystal has chosen you. It is why you are here. John shook his head. I don't believe it. I'm no hero. I'm nothing. The alien girl smiled, her eyes glowing brighter. You will see in time. We cannot explain it all now, but you will understand soon enough. John could feel the weight of their words, and despite his doubts, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that there was truth in them. A strange sense of purpose began to stir within him, like something deep inside was awakening. He wanted to resist. He wanted to turn away, to go back to the hopelessness of his solitary existence. But the pull of the alien girl's words was undeniable. I don't understand any of this, John murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. But I'm here now. What happens next? The alien girl who had first spoken to him nodded solemnly. Next, you will learn what it means to wield the power of our people. But be warned, the path you are about to take is fraught with danger. The enemy that destroyed us is still out there, and they are coming for you. But together, we may be able to fight back. John's heart raced again, not just from fear, but from the weight of what they were asking of him. The enemy that had destroyed their civilization. Were they coming for him too? Could he really be part of this battle? This struggle for survival? You will train, the girl continued, to use the power inside the crystal. We will teach you what we know, and we will protect you as long as you are willing to fight for our survival. John's mind reeled. This was no longer about his survival alone. It was about something much bigger. He had been abandoned by his people, left to die, and now, here he was, standing with beings who seemed to know him better than he knew himself. They believed in him, something he had never truly believed in himself. With a deep breath, he nodded slowly, finally accepting the weight of their words. I'll fight. I don't know how, but I'll fight. The alien girl smiled, her eyes glowing with something almost like hope. Then you are ready. In that moment, John realized that his life, his purpose, had just changed. He had come to this planet expecting death, but now he was being asked to rise from the ashes and fight. For them, for himself, and for a future he hadn't thought possible. The journey ahead would be difficult, but it was the only path left. And somehow, John knew he wasn't walking it alone anymore. The alien girl's secret. The quiet hum of the chamber filled the air, but it was no longer the only sound John could hear. As he stood before the towering crystal, the weight of the situation pressed down on him. It was one thing to be told he had a role to play in something larger than himself, but it was another thing entirely to realize just how deep the mystery went. These alien girls, who had brought him into this strange sanctuary, were not just survivors. They were part of a story much bigger than John had ever imagined. As the girl who had spoken to him earlier approached the crystal, her eyes shimmering with reverence, she spoke again, her voice low and filled with a sadness that caught John off guard. "This crystal," she began, "was the heart of our people. It held all our knowledge, our history, and our power. But it was also our downfall." John's brow furrowed as he stepped closer, his curiosity growing with each word. "What do you mean? How could a crystal bring your people down?" The alien girl turned her gaze to him, her expression a mixture of pain and determination. "Our people were once an empire. We were advanced, far beyond what you can imagine. We had peace, prosperity, and strength, not just in our technology, but in our unity. The crystal was a source of power for us, our knowledge, our life force. It allowed us to shape the very world we lived on." John could see the deep weight of what she was saying. The pride, the grief, the longing. It was all there in her eyes. "But something happened," he said softly, understanding that the story was far from over. "Yes," she said, her voice growing faint. "An enemy came. A force unlike any we had encountered before. They were not from our world, not even from our galaxy. They came with dark intentions, with technology that we couldn't even comprehend. We tried to fight back, but we were outmatched. They corrupted our crystal. They turned it against us." John's stomach tightened. "You mean they took control of it?" She nodded, her eyes distant as she remembered the horror. "They harnessed its power, twisted it, and used it against us. The very thing that gave us life became the tool of our destruction. We were powerless to stop them. In the end, the empire fell, and only a few of us remained. We hid here, in this forgotten place, far from the war they waged against us." John's mind was spinning. A crystal that could control the fate of an entire civilization. The idea was incomprehensible, yet the girl's solemn expression made him realize the truth in her words. But there was more, something that didn't quite add up. "But if you hid here," John asked cautiously, "why didn't you leave? Why stay in this place?" The alien girl sighed, looking at the crystal with a mixture of longing and resignation. "Because we couldn't. The power of the crystal, it is not something that can be controlled by just anyone. It requires balance. Only those who are attuned to it can harness its full potential. We are its guardians, the last of our kind. We were meant to protect it, to ensure that it never fell into the wrong hands again." John's heart raced as he pieced the story together. You want me to use it, don't you? You want me to fight against this enemy." The alien girl's gaze met his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Yes, but it is not as simple as you think. The enemy we face is more than just an army. They are a force that has taken control of many worlds, consumed them, and twisted them to their will. They feed on the energy of civilizations, destroying everything they touch. We are the last remnants of our people, and we cannot face them alone." John swallowed hard. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the very future of this world, and maybe even more. "But what can I do? I'm just one man. I've never even used a weapon like the ones you have." The alien girl stepped closer, her eyes softening with understanding. "You are not just one man anymore. You are part of something bigger. The crystal has chosen you because you have the potential to wield its power. The abilities you possess, the strength you have deep inside you, are the key to stopping them." John looked down at his hands, his fingers trembling. He felt the weight of her words, but still couldn't fully grasp the magnitude of what was being asked of him. He had been a soldier, yes, but a soldier in a war that now seemed insignificant compared to this. This wasn't about survival. It wasn't even about fighting a single battle. It was about defeating a force that had destroyed entire civilizations. "What do I have to do?" John asked, his voice tight with a mix of fear and determination. "How do I use this power?" The alien girl smiled softly, a sense of peace radiating from her as she spoke. "First, you must connect with the crystal. You must allow it to guide you. It is not just a tool. It is a living entity. It will teach you, give you the strength you need, but you must be willing to accept the responsibility that comes with it. Power is not something that can be taken lightly." John's chest tightened as he thought about the immense responsibility placed before him. But he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't turn back now. He had made his choice. He had accepted the path that lay ahead. Whatever the crystal had to offer, he was ready to face it. With a final deep breath, he stepped forward, his eyes never leaving the glowing heart of the crystal. As his hand touched its surface, a wave of energy surged through him, unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was as if the entire universe was speaking to him in that moment, opening doors inside his mind that had never been unlocked. Knowledge, power, and memories that were not his own flooded his senses. In that instant, John understood. He was no longer just a soldier. He was the bearer of a power that could change everything. The crystal had chosen him, and now he had to rise to the challenge. But even as the power coursed through him, he knew the battle was only just beginning. The enemy was out there, waiting, watching, and soon it would be time for John to face them. The enemy approaches. The crystal's power pulsed through John, filling every fiber of his being with an energy he couldn't fully comprehend. For the first time, he felt connected to something greater than himself. But even as the knowledge of the ancient civilization flowed through him, a sudden coldness swept over the room, as if the air itself had been drained of warmth. The alien girls who had been standing quietly beside him tensed in unison. Their eyes, once soft with hope, now held a fierce determination. The leader, the girl who had first spoken to John, turned toward him, her face grim. "They found us," she said, her voice low and sharp, as if she were speaking not to John, but to herself. John's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" he asked, feeling a cold knot of fear tighten in his stomach. "The enemy," she replied, her gaze distant as she stared out into the chamber's shadows, her senses reaching beyond the walls of their sanctuary. "They can feel the power of the crystal. It's only a matter of time before they come for us." John's mind raced. The weight of the crystal, still humming within him, was undeniable now. The power that had once seemed like a blessing now felt like a beacon, drawing attention to them in ways John couldn't yet fully control. The enemy that had destroyed the alien girl's civilization. They were real, and they were coming. His role in all of this was no longer a distant concept. He was part of this fight, whether he was ready or not. "What do we do now?" John asked, feeling the urgency in his voice. The energy inside him seemed to surge, and he wasn't sure if it was his own fear or something deeper, the crystal, pushing him forward. The leader of the alien girls closed her eyes for a moment, as though she were listening to something far beyond the physical world. When her eyes opened again, they were filled with an icy resolve. "We prepare. They won't come quietly, and we don't have time to waste. You felt the power of the crystal. You must learn to use it. Fast." John nodded, his muscles tightening with a mix of fear and determination. "How? I don't even know what this power can do." "You will," she said firmly. "But you must trust it. Trust yourself." Before John could respond, one of the other alien girls spoke, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anticipation. "They are close. I can feel them. Dark, cold energy, like a storm brewing on the horizon. We don't have much time." The room seemed to grow colder as the other alien girls moved into position, each of them taking up a stance that suggested they had been through countless battles before. John felt a sense of awe toward them, their calmness, their quiet strength. They had faced unimaginable threats in the past, but this time it was different. This time they had no guarantee of survival. They had no backup. They only had each other, and him. As they prepared for what was to come, the alien leader turned back to John. Listen to me carefully. The enemy you face is not just an army. They are a force of nature, relentless, unforgiving. They have destroyed countless worlds, corrupted everything they touched. We are the last survivors of our people, and it is your strength, your connection to the crystal, that may be the key to stopping them. But you must be willing to give everything. John's pulse quickened as her words sank in. He wasn't just fighting for his life anymore. He was fighting for the survival of an entire civilization, the last remnants of a once great empire. The weight of responsibility was crushing, but he couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now. What do you need me to do? He asked, his voice steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. The alien leader stepped closer to him, her eyes glowing with determination. You will be the one to stand against them. The crystal's power will guide you, but you must learn how to focus it, how to control it. In time, you will be able to use it as a weapon, as a shield, but you must not let it overwhelm you. If you do, it will consume you, and we will all perish. John swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling deep within him. He had already felt the power of the crystal, felt the surge of energy, but the thought of using it as a weapon, of being responsible for such raw, uncontrollable force, filled him with a new kind of fear. What if he failed? What if he wasn't strong enough to control it? There's no time for hesitation. The alien leader continued, her voice cutting through his doubts. The enemy is close. We don't know what they have, but we know they will stop at nothing to destroy us. We must strike first. The room seemed to hum with tension as the girls began to move toward the exit of the chamber. The sounds of battle echoed in their minds, the quiet preparations, the mounting fear that hung in the air. John followed them, his feet heavy with uncertainty. They led him down another narrow corridor, this one darker and more confined than the rest of the structure. As they reached the end of the tunnel, the walls opened up into a wide chamber. A massive door stood before them, and beyond it, the unknown. It was the first time John had seen fear in the eyes of the alien girls. Even they didn't know what awaited them on the other side. We can't fight them here, the leader said, her voice steady but strained. We need to take the fight to them, on our terms. With one final deep breath, she pushed the door open, and the world beyond erupted into chaos. The desert outside had turned into a battlefield. Dark clouds swirled in the sky, swirling with a violent energy that seemed unnatural. In the distance, the enemy's forces appeared, a dark, shadowy army of beings that seemed to shift and flicker like smoke with no true form. They moved in unison, a collective force of pure malevolence, marching towards the sanctuary. John's heart raced, and the crystal inside him hummed louder than ever before. The enemy was here. It was time to face them. No turning back now. The battle for survival had begun. A fight for survival. The battlefield stretched before John like an ocean of chaos. The sky above them was churning, dark clouds swirling ominously, crackling with violent energy. The desert sand underfoot had transformed into a twisted, hostile landscape, as though the very planet itself was reacting to the presence of the enemy. In the distance, John could see the shadowy figures of the enemy forces, a dark tide rolling toward them. The air was thick with tension, the kind of weight that presses down on your chest until it feels like you can't breathe. The alien girls stood beside him, their calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the storm brewing on the horizon. Their eyes, glowing faintly with the same eerie light that had surrounded them since John arrived, were locked on the enemy. They were ready. John, on the other hand, felt nothing but fear. Fear that he wasn't ready, that he wouldn't be able to control the power inside him, that he would fail them all. "What do we do now?" John asked, his voice hoarse, though he tried to keep it steady. The crystal inside him hummed, a constant reminder of the power he had just begun to understand. But it was no use. He didn't know how to wield it, how to focus it. The leader of the alien girls glanced at him, her expression calm but intense. "We fight, John. Together." As the enemy approached, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and the sky seemed to crackle with dark energy. The shadowy figures were getting closer, their movements fluid and unnerving. They were not human. They were something else entirely. Formless beings that seemed to shift and flicker, like smoke given life. Yet their presence was overwhelming, a force of pure destruction. John's heart pounded in his chest, but the words of the alien girl echoed in his mind. "You are not alone anymore. Trust in the power of the crystal. Trust in yourself." The time for doubt had passed. The alien girls raised their hands, and the air around them seemed to shimmer with unseen energy. The leader's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Prepare yourself, John. When the moment comes, you must use the crystal. Let it guide you." John swallowed, his mind racing. How was he supposed to control it? What if he messed up? What if he didn't have what it took? The enemy was almost upon them now, their dark forms blotting out the horizon, their presence suffocating. Without warning, the first wave of the enemy surged forward, their bodies twisting and shifting in a grotesque dance of destruction. The ground beneath them cracked and splintered as if the planet itself was being torn apart. John could feel the earth tremble beneath his feet as the air around him thickened, charged with an unnatural energy. The alien girls moved first, swift and graceful, like living shadows. They fought with an elegance that belied their strength, each movement calculated and precise. John watched, awestruck, as they unleashed blasts of light and energy that tore through the enemy with deadly force. But for every enemy that fell, more seemed to appear. The numbers were overwhelming. John took a deep breath, the crystal's power humming within him, urging him to act. The enemy wasn't slowing down. It wasn't enough to simply defend. They had to push forward. He clenched his fists, trying to focus, trying to find the energy he needed to fight back. The leader of the alien girls was beside him now, her voice sharp with urgency. "John, it's time. Focus. The crystal is yours. Use it." John closed his eyes for a brief moment, feeling the crystal's energy surge within him, as if it were alive, pushing him to harness its power. The moment he opened his eyes, something inside him clicked. He wasn't just standing on this battlefield anymore. He was part of it. The crystal's energy flowed through him like a river, filling every part of his being. With a shout, John raised his hand, and the crystal inside him responded, releasing a surge of raw power. A pulse of light shot from his palm, slamming into the enemy with an explosive force. The impact sent the shadowy figures flying, their forms disintegrating upon contact with the energy. For a moment, John stood in stunned silence, his heart racing. He had done it. He had used the power. But he didn't have time to celebrate. The enemy regrouped, their ranks swelling with more dark figures. They were relentless, showing no signs of slowing down, and John could feel his strength waning. His hand shook as he struggled to maintain control. The crystal's power was vast, but it was also volatile. The energy inside him felt like a living thing, wild and untamed. "Stay focused, John," the leader called out. "Don't let the power control you. You control it." John gritted his teeth, trying to steady himself. The battlefield around him was chaos, screams of battle, the sound of energy blasts, the crackling of the desert ground as it splintered under the force of the conflict. But amidst it all, he could feel the crystal's power guiding him, anchoring him in the storm. With a roar, John thrust his hand forward again, releasing another blast of energy that tore through the enemy's ranks. The ground shook beneath him as the crystal's energy surged, rippling through the desert, sending shockwaves of power into the advancing forces. The enemy seemed to falter, but only for a moment. They were not easily defeated. John's breath came in ragged gasps as he focused once more, channeling the crystal's power through his body. The pain in his muscles was almost unbearable, but he pushed through, knowing that this was the only chance they had. The alien girls continued to fight beside him, their attacks coordinated and precise. But now, it was John who held the key. The crystal inside him had awakened, and with it, he had the power to shape the future of this battle. The enemy began to waver, their dark forms flickering and shifting, but they were not yet defeated. John knew that the true test was yet to come. This fight would not be won in one strike. It would be a battle of wills, and John had to prove that his will was stronger than the dark forces that threatened to destroy everything. The crystal pulsed once more, louder now, its energy surging through his veins like fire. John clenched his fist, ready for whatever came next. The fight for survival was far from over, but for the first time, John felt ready to face it. The final choice. The battlefield stretched on, a whirlwind of chaos and destruction. The air was thick with the crackle of energy blasts, the sound of combat reverberating off the desert's jagged rocks. John could feel the power of the crystal surging through him, an endless tide of energy that both exhilarated and terrified him. The enemy had not relented. They were as relentless as ever, a dark force that refused to be vanquished. But John, driven by the knowledge that this battle was his responsibility, stood firm. He had chosen to fight. But now, in the heart of the conflict, another choice loomed, one that would shape his future and the future of everything around him. With every pulse of energy he unleashed, the enemy faltered, but only momentarily. They had learned to adapt, to shift and reform, seemingly unbreakable. John's arms ached, his energy dwindling with each blast, but his resolve was stronger than ever. The alien girls fought alongside him, their powers synchronizing with his, their bodies moving with a precision that John could only dream of. They were warriors, born of this land, born to fight. But he was an outsider, a stranger thrust into a battle he hadn't chosen. Still, there was no turning back. John gritted his teeth, channeling all his remaining strength into another blast of energy. This time, the enemy seemed to hesitate, recoiling slightly as the force of his power knocked them back. But they quickly regrouped, their forms shifting, almost phasing in and out of existence. The crystal's energy burned hotter within John, and he could feel it, an overwhelming force that threatened to consume him. The battle was reaching its peak, and John knew that something had to change. Something had to give. The leader of the alien girls, standing close by, saw the struggle in his eyes. Her face, usually so composed, was now filled with a mixture of worry and urgency. "John," she called out, her voice cutting through the noise of the battle. "You must choose. The crystal, the power. It can defeat them, but it can also destroy you if you don't control it. You must decide now." John turned to face her, his breath ragged, his body trembling. The crystal's power was too much for him to fully grasp, too vast for him to contain. He could feel it coursing through his veins, burning him from the inside. It was a weapon, but it was also a curse. He had already lost so much, his life as he knew it, his past. And now, in the heat of battle, he had to choose. Would he let the crystal consume him, or would he use it for something greater? "You have a choice," the alien leader continued, her voice soft but firm. "The power of the crystal can obliterate the enemy, but if you use it completely, you will never be the same. You will become something else entirely, something beyond human. The question is the price worth it? Is it worth the cost of your humanity?" The question hung in the air like a weight, pulling at John's very soul. He had always been a soldier, fighting for something greater than himself. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival. It wasn't just about winning a battle or defeating an enemy. This was about what he would become if he continued down this path. The power of the crystal was intoxicating, but at what cost? John's mind raced. He thought of the alien girls, of their lost civilization, of their struggle to survive. They had sacrificed so much, and now they were relying on him. The weight of that responsibility crushed him. He could not, would not, let them down. But could he afford to sacrifice himself in the process? The battlefield was fading into the background now. All that remained was the choice. The crystal pulsed once more, sending a shockwave of energy through him. The enemy was closing in, and John felt the crystal beckoning him to take control, to unleash its full power and end the conflict once and for all. But what would be left of him when it was over? In that moment, John made his decision. He stepped forward, his eyes burning with newfound clarity. I'll fight, but I'll fight on my terms. He reached out, not to take the crystal's power completely, but to channel it in a way that would protect those around him without destroying everything he was. The leader of the alien girls watched him, her expression softening as she saw the determination in his eyes. "You've made the right choice," she said, her voice full of respect. "Now let the crystal guide you." With one final deep breath, John released the power in a focused surge, not a destructive blast, but a force of protection. The crystal's energy poured out, wrapping around him like a shield, a barrier of light that pushed back the enemy. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as the battlefield was filled with a brilliant glow. The enemy recoiled, their forms flickering in the face of John's power. It wasn't the annihilation that he had feared, but a wave of light that drove them back, neutralizing their dark influence without eradicating everything in its path. When the light faded, the battlefield was quiet. The enemy had been forced into retreat, their dark presence no longer overwhelming the desert. The alien girls stood at his side, their expressions filled with awe and gratitude. The cost had been high, but John had held his humanity. He had made the right choice. The leader of the alien girls approached him, her voice filled with both respect and relief. "You did it, John. You didn't let the crystal control you. You controlled it." John looked around at the silent battlefield, his body still pulsing with the lingering energy of the crystal. The power had been overwhelming, but now he felt something he hadn't felt since he first arrived on this planet. Peace. He had made his choice, and now he would forge a new path, one that wasn't defined by destruction, but by survival, hope, and the strength to rebuild. He turned to the alien girls, a small smile tugging at his lips. "We've won, but there's still work to be done." The leader nodded, her eyes bright with gratitude. "Yes, and now we begin again, together." John had come to this planet to die, but instead he had found a new purpose, a new family, and a new future. The battle was over, but his journey had only just begun. The choice had been his, and it had made all the difference.